And we'll just hop in to this lunchtime visit. Thank you all for joining us today, but most importantly, thank you all for joining us throughout the year. This has been another fun home garden variety trial. And when we were pulling all the information together and stuff, Virginia and I were texting, and we were like, "This is our 8th year. We've been doing this for 8 years." Like it's hard to believe that it's been that long. But some of you, Jean, maybe others, who I think have probably been with us for all of those 8 years. So we are really excited to share what we've learned, and of course, get all of your feedback and commentary. And so we have just kind of a little bit of a data summary that shares the information that you shared with us. But certainly, as I'm talking about cultivars or things like that, if you have other feedback or comments or anything, put them in the chat box, and then we'll get to the end and talk about some of the things that we might grow next year. So before I get rolling, Virginia, do you want to say anything?
Nope.
Yeah. Yeah. So
you can be the voice. I just crunch the numbers.
The fun of this week has been, I have been reading over the comments and smiling and enjoying all of your feedback and combing through my pictures and picking out or your pictures, because some of these are definitely yours, and Virginia has been doing the statistics. So it's a team effort. All right, this is actually a picture from my trial plots in Knoxville, some flowers and some vegetables there in the background. And 2024, according to my experience and according to the comments that I looked over as I was scanning all of the data, was rather a challenging year. And so I will definitely second that. I think that it was a combination of having a wet, slow arriving spring that was followed by a very rapid onset of summer, shall we say. So I think that experiences were highly dependent on when you were able to get in and kind of when that really long hot period hit in June and July. So I'll tell you my experience, for instance, was that because there was so much moisture, we didn't get our plots at the farm prepped until the third week in May or something. So it was like May the 25th, 26th before I actually got all of my transplants in the ground, which seemed all good. We put them in, the ground was moist, life was happy. And then at a couple of weeks when they were really starting to take off on growth, it just got crazy hot. So, if you also hit that timing window, then we really ran into potentially heat stress conditions very quickly in some of our trials. And so these are the numbers from our mid-season survey, and we'll talk about that at the end, whether you liked the two survey. But essentially, we had about 2/3 of folks that reported that no issues prevented them from getting to the conclusion of the trial. We had some insect and disease, we had some wildlife, we had some etc. And the largest category of issues was actually the germination issue box. And I would largely attribute that to kind of a combination of environmental factors. I grew all of these seeds. I mean, I don't think we saw any like complete seed failures or anything. I think that a lot of this had to do with temperature and moisture. We had several people actually put in their comments, "I seeded these, and then we got a huge amount of rainfall and they got washed away." So I think that may have had a combination of a lot of environmental issues. Where were you all growing these trials? And for the mathematicians in the room, I want you to know that you could pick more than one of these options in the box, because we had several folks that were actually growing, say, in ground and in raised beds. So we actually wanted to get a sense of what that looked like overall. And this is, I feel like I've said this for the past 2 or 3 years, but this is the highest percentage of non-in-ground growing that we've ever had in the trial. And that is over 50% of folks growing in something other than a traditional in-ground soil gardens. So 49% in raised beds, 27% in container. That's up from what is usually about a 15 to 20% number. So that's exciting because we're getting more participation from hopefully, small space and urban areas. And we may also have many folks who are kind of doing both, but still a solid 40+% who are growing in traditional gardens. How are people growing these? Kind of what are the management techniques that you all are using? These are very similar to what we've seen in previous years with what do the pollsters say, a plurality of folks who are growing using both organic and conventional fertilizers. And we kind of change these to be inclusive of blood meal, bone meal, compost, those types of materials. Then about a third only organic, about a third only conventional fertilizers, and our none number was lower this year, which I feel is good, which hopefully means we didn't have so many plant failures that there was nothing to fertilize. So before I jump into this year's numbers, this is a shot from one of our reports a couple of years ago. I just want to say that we will, after we get done with this presentation over the next couple of weeks, do our best to, a couple of years definitely, but hopefully the next couple of weeks we'll put all of the information together and get it up to marketing and communications for the publication that hopefully this year will come out a little bit faster. I think that it was, I don't know, April or something. That is not our intent. So our intent is to get it up to them soon so that early in the year we can get this out. But as you're familiar with, this is kind of what the report will look like. All of these data are the comparisons that come from you, the overall numbers, the recommendation percentage, the reasons for gardening. And then the thing that is really getting to be a pretty fun list is that we now have many years worth of data and summaries. So I don't know, this may be some of the most work that Virginia puts into kind of the report is compiling this ongoing list of our high performers. So typically what we do is put together the varieties that have had 70% or more recommendation rate, and some of these we've grown for multiple years. So this is now, I think 4 or 5 pages or something at the end of the report. And this is often what I use when I teach kind of as a handout and things like that. And I think that that's a fun, what I was thinking, Virginia, is that we may get to the point where this favorites list is long enough that we could actually post them as 2 files so that this is easy to get to. And
yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I also wanted to add a comment on the slide you had before this, because we do have 2 additional graphs that are going in there this year. So we have the germination rate, and then we also have germination speed. So which one's germinated the fastest versus overall how many germinated. And we also have, in addition to the first fruit, there is duration of fruiting. So how long did it fruit for?
So we'll have 8 of these little pie chart boxes this year. Yeah. Awesome. And that is, of course, thanks to y'all for filling out both of those surveys. And then once this gets done, it will go on our UT Hort, and just as a technical note, uthort.tennessee.edu will get you to the same place as uthort.com. So there's a redirect. And then under our vegetables tab, of course, once we get the new calendar, and the new results, all of that will go there. But, we'll also send them out to you as soon as we get those done. All right, so that was the housekeeping and the overview. And now we're going to jump in to the trial results from this year. So in our snap bean trial, I think we probably had one of the most traditional comparisons that we've probably ever had. Here on the right is Buff Valentine, also known as Contender. And this is actually an older cultivar that's been grown for decades. Very traditional taste and look and flavor. And that came out in the comments and in the recommendation rate. And then over here on the left of your screen, on the right of your chart, is Magnum, which is a traditional tasting bean that actually looks more like a pole bean. So that's kind of the novel factor. And we got good comments on yield and taste on that one as well. So, 7.5, 7.9, those are two pretty high bush bean comparisons, and a 94 and 100% overall. So, um, right out of the gate, these were both really, really high recommendation percentages. We weren't quite as high on the whole beans, and so I'm using a seed catalog picture here, which is code for Natalie's pole beans didn't do very well in the garden this year. And so we see, in the sevens, that's perfectly fine. And then, pretty high recommendation rate. But we kind of had the traditional favorite of Kentucky Blue coming out with good comparisons for appearance, for flavor. We did have some comments from folks that Seychelles did pretty well in the heat, which was a big bean challenge for 2024 because bush beans and pole beans are sensitive to bloom drop when we get up in those 90s that we had for several days. So I think that some of those bush beans, especially, like I know for mine, if you get really long duration of heat in that early bloom period, it can really wipe out your yield. The pole beans a little bit better because you can have multiple flushes of blooms for those. But overall, pretty good on the beans. The okra was a really interesting trial. We've had some growers, actually some of my Concord friends here in Knoxville who've been telling me for several years, you got to grow some baby bubba. These are our favorites. So I tried to pick the two most compact okra that I could, and I guess I may have done fine, but I think the truth of the matter is that maybe we really only have like one really compact okra, which was the baby bubba. And so these were really interesting results because I had a lot of people, all of you, who were saying, wow, this was even more compact than I expected. And in my trials, it really was a very, very short little stubby guy. And then some folks who are like, well, it's called dwarf in the name, and it was 8 foot instead of 12 foot. So I guess if you call that a dwarf. So we had, a 2 or 3 foot baby bubba, and then our other dwarf was, 8 foot. So, but we got good comments as far as the yield and the duration of yield of that dwarf long green pod. So this is baby bubba. These are some Knoxville okra here on the left, and then dwarf long green pod on the right. So, if you really want a compact option, we probably are looking at maybe just one right now, but some good productivity out of some slightly shorter plants for our other dwarf cultivar. So, feel free to chime in the chat or anything if you have other cucumber comments. But my general comment of the cucumber season, after looking through everybody's comments and data and my own, was this is a challenging cucumber year. I think that the moist spring followed by the heat of summer really put pressure on a lot of our cucumber cultivars. And so we kind of saw that coming out in the data. But on this slightly more traditional slicer cucumber trial, the big thing that jumped out were the flavor comments on the cultivar Eversweet. So this was a slightly thinner skinned cucumber compared with a very traditional slicer Gateway. So Gateway is going to be one of those cucumbers that has a pretty wide disease package, some powdery mildew, some downy mildew, but it's going to be a traditional, 8-inch slicer and may actually have some bitterness, especially when we have the heat that we had this year. And that's kind of what we saw, is that we saw results of high yield, long picking window, and many folks said the Eversweet wasn't quite as productive, but I got really good tasting fruit even in a challenging year. So, really good, interesting combination. I can say in my own trials, Gateway was one of the highest yielding cucumbers in a not great cucumber year of 2024, and Eversweet was not so high, on that yield list. Tasty Green is actually a long burpless cucumber that we have grown before, and the ratings weren't quite as high in 2024 as they had been the previous time that we had reported it. And I would attribute that largely to some environmental stresses, probably. There were reports of pretty good yield and long harvest window but we also had some comments about some mottled coloring, some not great visual appearance. This is something that I typically see. These burpless or thinner skinned cucumbers, if you have some cucumber beetles in the plots, which a lot of people reported having cucumber beetles this year, you're going to see the damage on those fruits. And that's what I was kind of pointing at there at my cursor. But so no like big statistical differences jumped out in the cucumbers. It was a mediocre year for these longer Asian type or burpless cucumbers. So while my cucumbers didn't do fabulous, I wanted to show you some beautiful squash and cucumber pictures from around the state. Here's some from West Tennessee, showing us actually, we have some really nice trellis cucumbers there. So thank Jalen for sending in that picture. Then we had compact tomatoes. So these have been one of our, high participation over the last few years. And these are both cultivars that I've grown in trials before here in my trials in Knoxville, but we hadn't done widely throughout the state. So Better Bush is kind of a long on the market, very compact tomato. Home Slice is a newer, very determinate tomato. This is actually a home slice from one of my field plots from a few years ago, not quite right, but you can see, very, very compact for a determinate tomato, a good, couple 3 feet there, and larger clusters of smaller fruit, which is very much what you all saw in your trials as well. A little bit earlier fruiting. Oh, I got a pretty picture here coming in to us from Middle Tennessee from one of our trialers there. And that's kind of what we saw out of the home slice. Maybe 3, 4, 5 ounce fruit, but more of them, and some pretty good comments on taste. I think with the summer heat that we had, it was going to be not the best tasting tomato year that we ever had because we had a lot of stress on those tomatoes. But you can see, okay ratings for the Better Bush, but pretty good for the home slice. These aren't going to produce like a celebrity will in your garden. So in the raised bed or the container, they're not going to be quite as productive, but some pretty good results overall. I put this picture in here to share my tomato results from 2024, which were just not inspiring at all. I had this fabulous idea that I was going to do container tomato trials and in-ground tomato trials. And you can see, I planted a whole lot of containers on Memorial Day weekend, got them all set up and growing in the trials. And it was just so hot so early on for these young plants that my tomato yield was very unimpressive. But it was a really good pepper year. And so I share some of these pepper yields. These are some of the highest pepper yields that I've gotten in the 8 or 9 years that I've been doing trials. And so my pictures aren't quite as scenic as yours. They all tend to look the same, but these are some of the pretty peppers, really high yields. These 5 down here are some of the jalapenos. So it was a very good jalapeno year. Some good yields from some of our traditional bells, like that's an Alliance. This is Islander right here. That's Carmen. This is the 8415, the numbered lettered bell pepper, which I saw a little bit more disease on. This is the Valhalla, and this is the really pretty Dante jalapeno. So it was a terrible tomato year, but oh yeah, Kelly just put in a comment that she had really good peppers as well. So here's my environmental hypothesis. My environmental hypothesis is that really hot month of June, the peppers and tomatoes, both warm season crops, but peppers like just slightly higher temperatures than tomato. And I think that where we really got a lot of stress impact on our tomatoes, it was actually not terrible early growing season conditions for the peppers. And as late as like the 10th of October, I was picking gorgeous peppers. So it was a good trade-off there. All right, hopping back to the trial. and what you all saw. So Emperor's Jade tended higher than the results for Safari. Good comments for flavor and for yield. And we actually had a few interesting comments on maybe some stringy or fibrous texture for the Safari. So, you know, a little bit of kind of fruit quality differences that we saw on the zucchini. This was one of the entertaining trials for me, and I actually communicated with several of y'all throughout the season. So anytime we say compact for a zucchini or, you know, cucumber, any of those, it's kind of like those compact bubbas, baby bubbas on the okra. Like compact is in the eye of the beholder. And so these were slightly more compact, but they still had pretty prolific growth for some people. This is Bush Baby here on the left. And this isn't kind of a good illustrative picture because when picked small, they really did say small and tender, but they grew fast. Well, I mean, as all zucchini do, but here you can see the maturity that happened pretty quickly. And we had a few comments from folks that here was pretty tasty. Here the skin got tough relatively quickly. So, you know, good quality feedback from y'all. And then the Golden Star was really better appreciated for appearance and for flavor. They really do have a beautiful bright yellow appearance. This is an image from some of my community garden friends clear over in Memphis, and they sent this in the middle of the summer to illustrate the fact that just because you write compact by a name and a cultivar description does not in fact mean that it always stays compact. So there's some very prolific compact zucchini from Memphis. The winter squash trial was probably overall our lowest rated. We don't grow winter squash every year because there's longer vines and the longer seasons. We just tend to not get as great results, especially in stressful summers like we had this year. The Hubbard squash, we had a lot of comments about poor germination or poor early growth, heavy insect pressure. Some people use those Hubbard squash as actually trap crops for things like cucumber, vine borers and things like that. So yeah, that is what we saw. And the fact that that I don't have images from my own plots kind of tells you that I saw some of the same thing. But we did have some good comments about the flavor and the quality of the Tahitian butternut. And I'll give credit back to y'all because that was a suggestion that we got on last December's end of season visit. And a lot of people have said, even in a challenging year, this actually performed pretty well, good taste, good texture, and as you can tell, 100% of the people that grew it did recommend it. So that's a fun, open pollinated, kind of heirloom favorite that we had good experience with this year. This was probably one of our lower rated basil trials, and mostly because we got comments that these purple basils were pretty, right? But if you are a Genovese basil aficionado or serious about your use of basil in culinary applications, most of what we heard was that the red wasn't quite the flavor quality that we were seeing out of the green. And I would say, you know, from most of my experience, I would tend to agree. This is a dark opal here on the right, Prospera here on the left. This is a pretty new cultivar, Prospera Red, which has good downy mildew and fusarium resistance. It was a little bit less prolific in growth. I grew them in my hydroponic trials, as you can tell, to kind of get them in early in the season. And those were generally the types of feedback that folks saw. Grew well, was pretty, I mean, generally positive comments. But if you're looking for really that culinary quality and may not be quite up to some of the other Genovese green. The dill trial, these were both compact dill, so you're not going to get quite the large prolific growth that you may be used to out of some of the more traditional garden herbs. And, you know, the ratings were fine, not, you know, not fabulous. You can tell I grew them here in the hydroponic system. And I'll tell you, one of the most entertaining parts of the trial for me was even in a greenhouse, which clearly was not completely airtight or shut up. I had all kinds of cucumber feeding. By the time I got to the end of the dill trial, they were just little sticks. Now, this is not a swallowtail. I think this is some kind of a moth cultivar. There are many, many green caterpillars, but good good larval support anyway. And I share with you a beautiful dill image from one of our trialers that shows this really doing well on some fabric containers there. So thanks to Mary for those pictures. And this, I believe, also a little cameo there of Prospera Red. So some gorgeous basil porch trials from some of our trialers throughout the state. Really good ratings from the sunflower trial. So nearly an 8.5 and a 7.5. This is Firecracker image coming to us from Middle Tennessee, beautiful bicolor. And people really were pleased that, the slightly more compact growth habit. It wasn't quite like the okra. We didn't have any 8-foot compact. Both of these really did stay fairly small. High recommendation percentage, good comments for health and earliness of flower, especially for the firecracker. A few comments that we heard about teddy bear was that it tended to be a little bit smaller plant, really dense flower head, and so maybe a little bit more weather damage there. But overall, pretty good comments from both of these sunflowers. And for the zinnia, so this was a fun trial for me because you all were growing zinnias all throughout the state, and 2024 was actually the first year of a cut flower trial that we, both in research stations in Knoxville and in Jackson, were also growing zinnias and cut flowers. So especially the Benari Giant mix, that was one that we had in our trials. Cactus is actually one that I grew in trials last year. So both of these I had grown, and an 8.2 and a 7.8. There wasn't statistical difference between these two. Really good returns all across the state. So mostly some kind of general commentary was that people, really like the size of the Benary. It's very often used in cut flower production because it's going to give us some of the most consistently long stems that oftentimes we'll want for cut flowers. Probably held up a little bit better. Some of the comments that we saw about this cactus was, interesting appearance, but maybe a little bit faster, weather damage or deterioration in the field. And so, just kind of some variation there, but overall, good recommendation percentages. We did okay on our beets. We're moving to some of the cool season. Now we had 2 cool season cultivars. For the first 2 years that we did the trial, we just weren't brave enough to do cool season because we were afraid that we'd get them all out too late. But we've been doing pretty well with the early shipping. And so these are some beautiful beets. Anytime you see a truly artistic shot, you know that it came in from a trialer. Mine all tend to be fairly consistent. So we see some gorgeous beets here. And actually this image illustrates what was kind of the general commentary from the evaluations, that the Zeppo tended to be just a little bit larger, but the Touchstone Gold was a beautiful color. We had several comments that it was a little bit milder taste, but maybe not quite as fast growing and robust. So you can kind of see there the what we saw in the comments are kind of shown in these beet images. This is my own kale, and these are both kale cultivars that I had grown in trials before, and then overall we got good ratings and good feedback from across the state. So Black Magic here on the left is more of a Toscano type, a lacinato, some people call it dino kale, so just a lot different leaf form. Darker with a little bit of a bluish cast. And then over here is Prism on the right, and Prism is a more traditional kale, so you kind of see that ruffled leaf edge, but it's very compact. It's actually an All-American Selections winner from 6 or 8 years ago, so a good container cultivar or hydroponic cultivar. And nearly a 7.5 and an 8.0, so very good very good ratings, 90 to 100% of, folks would recommend them. we got a lot of good comments about both of them. I think that maybe we got maybe slightly higher yield out of some of the prisms. Sometimes I tend to see black magic maybe get started off a little bit low. But overall, and a lot of people, may prefer the difference in leaf texture. I kind of like some of those dino kales because you tend to have smaller midribs and a little bit more leaf texture. So overall, very good results there. And then our last trial was our youth trial, which was a snacker cucumber. Oh, and once again, this is a picture from Linda. I forgot to add in the image credits there. But it illustrates one of the interesting things that we saw with a lot of our cucumbers this year, which was due to hot summer, which can limit, pollinator movement, which can impact our bloom rate and all kinds of plant stress factors. We saw quite a few pollination issues on some of our cucumbers. So these are some pictures of mini me looking kind of goofy with some pollination issues. This can be temperature related, it can be pollinator related, it can be weather, stress, moisture stress. So we saw a lot of stress factors that came into play on some of these pollination issues. The other interesting thing that came out of these cucumbers, which probably I should do a better job of communicating about, is that these were both parthenocarpic cultivars. So they could grow in containers, they could grow in greenhouses, and they don't actually require pollination for fruit production. However, if there are other cucumbers in the area, or if you have bees that have cucumbers in the vicinity that they're visiting, they will, in fact, fertilize, and you'll have seed set in those, what were supposed to be seedless cucumbers. And we definitely saw that quite a bit in the mini-me, even some comments about actually having fairly large seeds in those mini-me. So that was just one of those things where if we're growing a lot of different cultivars in the garden, we're going to be more likely to see seeds in our seedless cucumbers. But, we also had a lot of folks that enjoyed the really small snacker and that got good taste and productivity out of them if they, stayed on the picking. These are ones you have to pick almost every day. So that was kind of the rundown of our trials and what we have seen this year. Hopefully it was good pacing, not too fast, but we'll keep that rolling. The calendar for 2025, I just wanted to provide an update for counties that ordered those hard copy. They should be arriving really soon. The boxes got to Knoxville yesterday. And then in the next couple of weeks, we'll also be posting this online where we'll have the easy to use PDF version, and I'll send that out to all of you. So that'll be available as well. And the final thing that we always talk about, which I will, I'll leave on this slide for a little bit, and then, if you've got any other comments or ideas, we've had good luck with tomatoes in rose beds and containers for the last few years. And I'm kind of thinking that maybe we just need to, try some larger tomatoes and see how that goes. So, maybe we'll do some traditional slicers and send out some seeds and see how that transplant process goes, because we've been doing pretty well with tomatoes for the last few years. And I'll go through this list, and then I'll jump back to the comments because I see I just have a few questions in. We've had a lot of vining, larger cucumbers over the last few years, maybe some container cucumbers. I had some really good comments from some trialers about some ideas for kind of some compact, some mini melon. I don't know if any of you guys have tried it yet, but some of the columnar basil I think might be fun to try in containers, because we've grown a lot of basil over the last few years, but we haven't tried any of these longer, narrow ones. Keep going with a couple of cool season, maybe get in some radishes or something that's a little bit faster days to harvest than the beets were to to provide more time, maybe for opportunities in the springtime. And then I think one of the cultivars that we're going to trial in our cut flowers for 2025 is actually going to be some Rudbeckia hirta and some Rudbeckia triloba. And I think that some of our flowers next year, we may actually do some of those Rudbeckia and have y'all match those.